Hey guys, so Lord here, back again with another review, and today we'll be taking a look at the NECA Toys Disney Gargoyles Ultimate Demona. Now before we get into it, let us first take a look-see at both the front and the back of the packaging. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we get into the meat and taters of this review, Demona does come with a plethora of accessories. First up, Demona comes with 3 sets of hands, the first of which is this pair of claw hands so she can rip you a new one. The second of which is this pair of fist hands so she can punch your freaking lights out. And lastly, she comes with 2 gun-holding hands, a trigger finger hand on the right, and on the left, a relaxed hand to balance the guns in. Next up, Demona comes with 2 interchangeable faceplates, the first of which being this sadistic, smirking face, looking like she's up to some shady shit, as usual. The second of which is this absolutely terrifying, screaming face. And if that ain't nightmare fuel, I don't know what is. Have fun sleeping tonight, kids. Up next, Demona comes with 2 different blaster weapons. The first of which comes from the finale of the pilot of the Gargoyles animated series, Awakening Part 5, where she almost takes out Goliath, but is straight up roundhouse kicked by Elisa Maza in the face, leading to her supposed demise. The second of which is this more rifle-looking blaster. Well, the first one had a little bit more of a rocket launcher motif going for it. This one definitely has more rifle vibes going for it, and I do believe she uses this at the tail end of Season 1, I want to say around Episode 10. She fights Hudson with this blaster. That said, it's a little bit tricky to get her to hold it naturally, while the rocket launcher I think is a much better fit for her trigger finger hand. And last but certainly not least, especially in this case because Demona comes with one of the most pivotal artifacts in the entire series, and that is of course going to be none other than the infamous spellbook known as the Grimorum Acanorum. That is the correct pronunciation. It's actually not that hard once you put some effort into it, but I do understand that not everyone watched this show as much as I have, so therefore I'll let that slide. That it does have multiple syllables, so what are you gonna do? But of course, it wouldn't be a NECA review if they didn't go a little bit above and beyond with the execution of this spell book, because you can take this little latch on the side here off and open it up. Very carefully, might I add, you don't want to break anything, but there you go. Here is the Grimorum on the inside. You can also flip these pages a little bit too, and really well detailed. I think they did a bang up job with this. NECA usually exceeds all expectations when it comes to accessories, and Demona here is no exception. But I will tell you, this thing can be tight, so I would advise heating it up a bit. It is actually made out of really hard PVC plastic. It's not made out of ABS like I initially thought it was, which is hard plastic for those of you not in the know. But with that being said, let us now move on to the aesthetics and articulation. Taking a closer look at our Angel of the Night here, and can I just say that this figure looks gorgeous? Because it does. I was never the biggest fan of Demona from the series. I always thought she was a little bit too much of a bitch, but that's kind of the point. I much preferred Angela, if I'm being quite honest with you, which I can see a lot of these parts being reused to give us that figure. The legs, the arms, with the exception of the bicep here, which this actually feels like a glued on piece, not a sculpted piece, so, or a piece that's sculpted to the bicep permanently, I should say. So I would think that at some point we will be getting an Angela figure, which would be cool because, like Thalog, we've never gotten her before, even though she is heavy reuse of Demona, or has potential to be, with the exception of maybe the torso. You'd have to change that up a bit, and give her a new belt and whatnot. But at any rate, this figure is awesome. I love this figure. Much like any figure in this NECA Gargoyles line, I had little to no problems with this figure. I just had to heat up the elbows and knees, and I actually had to heat up the little butthole to plug the tail in, which works fine. I would say this is probably the best tail of the bunch, the easiest to pose and whatnot, probably because it's skinnier. Everything works better when there's less meat on it, right? That's what she said. But at any rate, she looks great, man. Looks like Demona. You know, kind of already took a close-up look at the face sculpts for both her faces during the accessories, but let's just take a gander at that again. Looks really good, man. I dig it. Like the little metal earrings, too. That's a nice touch. And I like the fact that this down here is metal. Not sure about this. And I would say if you're going to be careful with anything on this figure, this little bicep bracelet, you don't want to break that thing off. I don't know if that's metal or not. It does not feel like it is. It does not feel the same as this down here. But I could be wrong. But as far as her articulation is concerned, her head can look side to side, down pretty well, up not so much at all, which I guess is really the only complaint I would have with this line for a bunch of characters who are meant to fly. And since a lot of people are probably going to be displaying these hanging from the ceiling, they can't look up at all, and that's silly. So maybe at some point we'll get ones that can look up. But for now, they're all kind of just looking down at the smaller figures on your shelf. As far as their shoulders go, they will rotate. They will go out to the side pretty far. We'll go back down. Shows a bicep swivel. Double joint at the elbow, which gives you good range. But again, you're going to want to be careful with that. You don't want to snap it, but I did heat that up a lot. So, to my understanding, is that's definitely... This is probably the only joint that really gave me any kind of problems, is this elbow here. I was a little bit nervous about tearing it at first, but now that it's moving, it seems to work okay. Her wrists all have swivel and hinge joints, and it's all the same hinge joint. Now, there is a science to popping these out. Now, first and foremost, heat the arm without the hand in it. That's the first bit of advice I can give you. But the second is slowly rotate it as you pull it out, and it's a lot easier and a little bit less cringeworthy. And then you just kind of finesse it back in there. And you shouldn't have any problems with the hand snapping on you. Knock on wood. But at any rate, her torso, she can rotate. The upper torso, she can crunch back a little bit. You got a little quiver in there. There's not a whole lot of movement in there, which I'm okay with because that was my problem with Goliath. Too much range, and he just got kind of loose on me, so I had to put some glue up in there. I'm going to have to put some glue up in her too, but in a different spot. We'll talk about that in a minute. Her waist does rotate. Supposedly this had like a ball joint in it, but again, there's nothing on mine. The tail, as part of the course for this line, you can hinge it up, you can hinge it down. You know, just kind of adjust it around and whatnot. Have it sit on the floor like that. That's typically what I do. Her hips, getting this arm out of the way. Go out to the side, back down. Can move forward and back. No creaky joints of doom on this one. I know Goliath and Thalog both had that, but she clearly does not. But if these ever get loose, the ball pegs are easily accessible. So I can Hit those with some glue if I needed to. I don't think I'll need to, though. She does have a thigh cut that works okay. That's just rotating on that ball there. And then she has double knees, which you can straighten them out, or you can bend them, like so. The bottom knee on this side is a little tight, but again, a little bit of heat will fix that right up. And typically, I have her like this, with her knees bent a little bit, with this top joint, so her little spike dads are sticking out, like they did in the show. So that's cool, that you can do that. And she stands actually really well. Mine does anyways. I can't speak for all the Demonas out there, but mine stands really, really well. I didn't have any problems getting her to stand. And then as far as the ankles go, you really gotta grab right where the joints are on this figure. If anything, you're gonna want to be extra careful with her because she is a little smaller than good old Goliath and Thalog, so yeah. She does have an ankle hinge there, which works fine. I did have to turn her foot sideways in order to really access that, but there you go. And then she also has hinged toes, which that's a little stuck on that side. How about this side? Yeah, she's got hinged toes. Just take my word for it. You really gotta get up in there. There we go. And get them to work. And they do have that rocker too. I don't know if I mentioned that up here, but she does have that. And then she has peg holes at the bottom of the feet. Or the stand she does not come with, but if you have a McFarlane hockey puck stand, that will work. It doesn't matter if it's got a logo on it or not. All of them work. It's a universal stand. But that's Demona in a nutshell, with the exception of two really big things that go on her back, which seems to be the point of contention with this figure, and it actually is with mine, unfortunately, but I do have a fix for that. However, I need to make this review as honest as possible based off of how the figure comes out the box, and shy of getting joints to work and whatnot. Doing extra modifications like that is going to prohibit me from doing that. So I'll show the wings off as they are right now, but when we get into size comparisons, I will probably have them modified by then. And you'll be able to tell whether or not the wing is sitting up or not. But Demona's great, man. I think she's an awesome figure. But with that being said, before we move on to some size comparisons, let's get those big old honk of wings on her, shall we? Let's. And as promised, here is our Angel of the Night, complete with her absolutely massive wings. And while they may not be quite as large as Goliath and or Thalog's, they're still massive in their own right. And this is unfortunately my only real point of contention with this figure, and to an extent with you guys in the toy community, because I see a lot of people complaining about the loose wing issue on this figure, but nobody's really doing anything about it other than just complaining about it. And while I do believe NECA needs to know that this is a major problem, because I think I've only really seen about 4 reviews where this doesn't seem to be an issue on the quote-unquote reviewer's figure, it's still a pretty major issue, and I think it would be a little bit more helpful if people took a little bit of a risk and tried to find solutions for the problems they're having here, which is what yours truly did, because he ain't no bitch. So, with that being said, I can turn her around here. I forgot to mention that the regular kind of smirky faceplate on mine is a little bit loose, so if it falls off, it falls off. I'll put it back on for size comparisons. But there's the back. You can see her wings spread out here, And unfortunately, the right one on mine will not stay up very well. It's kind of resting on this other one, which is nice and tight for the most part. I can give you guys a little bit more up close personal look here. You can see that this is fine. This is acceptable. But this here, it just kind of droops and sags and whatnot, and I even have it out a click because it's a little bit better when it's not all the way in like this. But when it is, it just kind of, oh no, it wants to make me look stupid. That figures, but at any rate, it's not the tightest fit. It's much better than it was. I did the Elmer's glue trick in there, and I think I might hit that a couple more times, maybe a few more times, and see if that does anything, because it seems to be improving slowly, so it just seems like it needs more adhesive in there. And I don't really worry about the peg breaking or anything. I just don't have the patience to try and track another one of these down, especially when Target's only getting, what, 2 at a time, 1 at a time? And not enough to worth going through the hassle, is basically how much they're getting right now. So, with that being said, as you guys know, if you watch my Thalog review, if you watch my Goliath review, when it comes to these wings, I always have Mr. Brian, aka my dad, aka the old man, heat these up with a hair dryer and lube them up with some dish soap before I plug them into the back of the figure. I didn't need to heat up the back. I thought I was, because they weren't really plugging in, but I'm kind of glad I didn't, because this wing was all droopy dog, mopey sad, and not wanting to stay up. So, yeah, make sure you heat these up, you lube them up, you get those hinges to work before you stick them in the back of this figure. If I have to, I will record a separate video talking about this fix for those of you guys out there who just like to go gung-ho and break your shit. That way, you don't have any excuses, because if you break any from now on, it's because you didn't watch the goddamn video. So, you know, at the end of the day, I'm kind of sick and tired of people bitching about this figure, but not really doing anything about it other than just complaining about it. And while I won't let the loose wing thing slide, I think NECA needs to be held accountable for that. I do also think it is a pointless point of articulation, because if you watch the show, you know damn well they don't do that movement with their wings enough for it to be a necessity as far as a point of articulation goes. I think the articulation people just need as many points as possible to help themselves sleep at night, and it's kind of ridiculous. And when it starts to affect the aesthetic of a figure like this one, that's when I'm not okay with it, because you guys know me, I don't mind a little bit of added articulation here and there, but literally, if you watched this show, with the exception of the one time in the intro where Goliath roars and his wings lift up in the air, or when Brooklyn wraps his wings around his waist, they don't really pivot their wings up and down. So why they even do that in the first place is kind of beyond me, because as far as my memory serves, their wings move back, forward, and collapse into the cloaks and or capes. So the rotation is pointless to me, and I would be okay if NECA just omitted it completely and we didn't have that point of articulation anymore. It's definitely a point I didn't utilize on Goliath or Thalog, so I don't really see a point of utilizing it here other than to find the sweet spot to get the wings to set up. Other than that, I still like this figure a whole heck of a lot. I think she's really awesome. But with that being said, let us now move on to some size comparisons. First up, here's the new NECA Demona next to her vintage counterpart from ye old Kenner line, and in my opinion, I think we've come pretty far, if I do say so myself. Next up, here she is alongside another figure from this NECA Toys Gargoyles line, Goliath, complete with cloak wings. Up next, here she is next to a couple other femme fatales, the Hasbro Marvel Legends Angela, and the Executive Replicas Coffin Comics Lady Death. And last but certainly not least, we have our two regulars, the Mythic Legion's Brother Mandibulus, the 11th Spawn, who's not towering over everyone today because Demona is a gargoyle after all. So with that being said, time to wrap things up. Some final thoughts. Overall, and even though my Demona here does suffer from loose wing syndrome, which seems to be a common problem people have been having with this figure as of late, top that off with the fact that mine's more sadistic, smirky looking head sculpt falls out of the head quite easily, I still can't bring myself to shit on what is a figure from one of my top 3 favorites, I don't know what you want to call it, brands, franchises, whatever you want to call it, of all time. Of course, the other two being Spawn and Ghost Rider. I just can't do it, man. I would much rather try and find a solution to those problems and follow up with you guys with the solutions for said problems if they are in fact effective. That said, I'm not going to condone this type of quality control. Not sure what you'd call that either. But at any rate, I do hope NECA does find a solution for these problems at some point in the near to distant future, particularly when it comes to the release of Angela, which I believe is inevitable because she will most likely reuse a lot of these same parts, and it would suck if she had the same QC issues as well. So at this price point, no, that's not acceptable, but at the same time, this is one of my favorite cartoons of all time, one of my favorite shows of all time, one of my favorite series of all time, and I want nothing more than to see this line be as successful as it can so we can get characters we've never gotten before, much like Angela and actually Thalog, who I took a look at quite some time ago now. So with that being said, if you are like me and you are all in on the NECA Toys Gargoyles Ultimates line, this is a no-brainer. You definitely need to pick up the Angel of the Night, but keep in mind she is still a part of the Target Haulathon. A little bit tricky to find in stores, but it has occurred to me that she is currently available on the Target app, or at least was, so just keep an eye out for her there. I think it'd be better to get her off there than in store because the stores only seem to be getting 1 or 2 at a time, whereas the website, I'm sure they have way more available, and she'll be in stock more frequently over there. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you are so inclined, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know whenever I upload more reviews like this one. If you haven't already, please hit me up on Instagram at Overlord Productions. But as always, keep the comments civil because the world sucks enough as it is. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.